This video is about what we learned from the last 4 days of fallout between the US, Greenland and Denmark. It started with a tweet and ended with US being pitted against NATO. Who would have thought that NATO deterrence would be defending Denmark against aggression from the United States? I'm still kind of shocked about that actually. Anyways, I'm Stephen Nikander Højlund, a Danish PhD in social science reporting for the Danish Dream Media Group. Let's get right into it. This story begins right after the United States captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. That operation sent a clear message. The US is willing to act unilaterally and decisively. Within hours, Katie Miller, the wife of Stephen Miller, posted an image on X. Greenland wrapped in the US flag with the word soon. Stephen Miller is not a random figure. He is Donald Trump's chief strategist and one of the most influential voices in the White House. So this was not read as a joke, especially not when it was linked to the attack on Venezuela. In Copenhagen and Nuuk, it was seen as pressure immediately. Greenland's prime minister responded quickly that Greenland's future will not be decided on social media. The next escalation came from Stephen Miller himself. In media appearances, he stated openly that Greenland should belong to the United States.
The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States.
He even suggested that no country would dare oppose the US militarily over Greenland. That statement alone sends shockwaves through European capitals, because Greenland is not just a land, it is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And Denmark is a NATO member. At that moment, this stopped being rhetorical noise. Now, here is an important detail many people overlook in my opinion. When Donald Trump was asked about Greenland aboard Air Force One, he did not embrace the topic at all actually. He said, "Ask me in 20 days. We'll talk about it in 2 months."
On Greenland,
What, Greenland now?
yeah, on Greenland.
How did we come up to Greenland?
So, do you expect to take an action against Greenland?
Well, I don't want to talk about Greenland. Let's talk about Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine, and we'll worry about Greenland in about 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days.
That tells me something crucial. I don't think that Trump wanted to talk about Greenland at that particular moment in time, but every time the reporters ask him, he has to respond down the lines of what he already said previously. And so he gives the same spiel over and over about national security and military intervention that he won't rule out. Actually, Trump just wanted to shine after the Maduro affair. So Trump had plenty on his plate and didn't want to talk about Greenland just then. That's my interpretation. But the genie was already out of the bottle, so to speak, and Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen of Denmark responded quickly. She, of course, reminded Washington that Denmark, Greenland and the Faroe Islands are sovereign entities. And then she worked in the background to shore up support from Denmark's NATO allies. Luckily for her, they were all together physically to discuss support for Ukraine. So, shortly after, a joint declaration was issued by European and NATO leaders. France, Germany, the UK, Italy and Poland, as well as many others, including also the allies from the Scandinavian countries. The message was very simple: Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. And Denmark is a NATO ally. Now, you would think that this thing was just over by then. Denmark had secured the backing of the largest countries in Europe as well as Canada. But in response, Washington issued a formal declaration reiterating USA's interest in Greenland and that US military is always a tool available for the commander-in-chief.
This is a new statement from Caroline Levitt just into CNBC moments ago. She says President Trump has made it well known that acquiring Greenland is a national security priority of the United States. Utilizing the U.S. military is always an option at the commander-in-chief's disposal.
This was really the turning point for many countries. In fact, it was pissing up and down the backs of not only Denmark and Greenland, but on all major European NATO allies. Now reactions really started to come in. An Austrian NATO official talked about seizing US bases in Europe. The French military tweeted, "Do you need help?" to Denmark. Members of Congress, including Republicans, started to react and criticizing Trump openly. The shit show had begun, in other words.
It's just completely unhinged what Stephen Miller is allowed to say, but they're saying the quiet part out loud, right? They're threatening a NATO ally.
There is absolutely no legal justification whatsoever to use military force against a NATO ally.
Is amateurish behavior with respect to the treatment of our NATO allies.
And then finally came the New York Times interview with Donald Trump yesterday. This is where everything changed, really. Trump said it would be psychologically satisfying to have Greenland.
Ownership is very important,
Why is ownership important here?
because that's what I feel is psychologically needed for success.
And he also openly admitted he was willing to risk NATO over Greenland. That single admission reframed the entire conflict as well. This is no longer about defense in his point of view, it's about desire and prestige. And allies noticed it immediately. So what we could learn from these past 4 days is the following. Greenland has never been about US national defense, as I also pointed out in my previous video. All the time it has been about Trump's ego. And this strange comment about it being psychologically satisfying to own Greenland is just a Freudian slip in my opinion. The US arguments to why they need Greenland have fallen apart one by one. J.D. Vance's comments yesterday was also very revealing, I think. He did not repeat the threat. In fact, he softened really the message. He said European leaders should take Greenland's security more seriously. The wording here is actually super important. Now it was not on Denmark alone to protect Greenland, but on the European allies to protect Greenland, even though the United States has a base there. And it was also a reminder, not a threat. In my interpretation, this was a retreat. I can only imagine the loads of work US officials have been putting into stopping this from escalating and putting some sane words into J.D. Vance's and Trump's speaker notes. Finally, to sum it all up, what we have learned the last 4 days have actually been super important in this whole debacle about Greenland. We saw the national security argument completely collapse. Why? Because NATO deterrence would always be more important than whatever threat there is around Greenland. Anyway, US appears to be very good friends with Russia, so what is the real threat actually? We also heard from Trump almost admitting that it's for his own psychological pleasure that he wants Greenland, not for some long-term strategy goal. We learned that actually Trump didn't really want to speak about Greenland, but he was just forced by a journalist's question. And that has happened so many times that someone asks him that question and he just repeats, national security, we need Greenland. We also learned that Greenland has now become a European problem and not just a Danish problem. It's a major win for Mette Frederiksen in my point of view. Finally, we also learned that important Republican voices came out of the bush as soon as NATO was called into question. It's my personal hope that Denmark and Europe now continues the pressure and starts deploying some troops to Greenland, instead of just waiting for the next time Trump wants to tweet something ridiculous. It's better to be in the driver's seat of the narrative, I think. It will be harder and harder for Trump to use the military intervention card if European troops are stationed in Greenland as well. After all, then the US military would suddenly be facing France and Sweden and Germany and God knows who. And then it becomes a little bit more complex. I think Trump and his administration was forced back into the cave on this one. It was a tremendous piece of diplomatic work from Denmark's side, and it has been prepared for actually 1 year or so, I think. That's my take, but let me know what your take is in the comments below. Until next time, take care and be empathetic to one another out there.